Caledonian Elixir. Live from Glasgow, Scotland, and wearing sunglasses, welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent, and we are on YouTube, Twitter, X, Rumble, Facebook, and of course, as a podcast on Spotify. And don't forget, if you want to support, like, subscribe, and follow. So, yeah, I'm wearing sunglasses, but it's not for aesthetics. I've been up for almost 17 hours now, and there's a light beaming in my face, and it's irritating my eyes. So I thought I would put on the glasses. So, welcome back, people. And if you're finding us for the first time, we're a show that covers everything from politics to the paranormal, always told with Scottish wit and true grit, with guests and calls. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll notice the background is different. We are constructing two new studios, isn't it? Aye. So we're leveling up here, hopefully soon. Now we've got a returning guest joining us in a minute. The last time he was on was around 7 months ago, and we had a informative and interesting conversation then about Trump, U.S. society, politics, and religion. And as the US is experiencing a whirlwind of social unrest, as President Trump is wanting to expand its borders to encompass Greenland and potentially attack Iran, I thought there's no better time to get him back on to, let us know what's really going down over there. So, without further ado, the host of the Hake Report, James Hake.
Thank
Hake,
you,
how you
man.
doing?
It's good to be back, Victor. I appreciate you, man. And shout out to the Caledonian Elixir.
Vincent.
Vincent, not Victor.
Yeah.
You started with a V. Horrible.
Yeah. So how are you to this afternoon?
I'm doing
This
well,
afternoon
thank
where
you.
are?
Yeah, it's afternoon where I am, almost evening, and it's early morning after midnight for you.
So it's been almost seven months since you were last on. How's your show been going since I saw you last? I've been tuning in now and again, and I've seen you. But how's your show and the Jesse Lee Peterson show been progressing?
Been going well. A lot of callers. A lot of people have been finding some help spiritually, with Jesse's message, which is really nice, and dealing with some crazy stuff going on. I'm glad that President Trump is in office in these times. It's comforting, although the world is crazy, and they're definitely on the wrong path overall.
The way I see it when I tune into legacy media, whether it's CNN, Fox News, or the BBC over here, you get a soft-spoken horror show, and it's refreshing when I tune into alternative media outfits like what you're a part of yourself and Jesse Lee Peterson. So for my audience who may have missed you on last time, could you just give us a general description of your background and your show as well?
All right. I was raised Christian, a white Christian in a majority Hispanic and Asian area, maybe a few whites. Rarely we would see blacks in the outskirts of LA, going to church, just being normally, regularly Christian conservatives in America, voting for George W. Bush, my first time voting at age 18 in the year 2000 or whenever that was. And then not wanting Obama, not particularly liking McCain or even really Romney. And then Obama was just he kind of pulled me into politics. He and the Jesse
Your
Peterson.
hatred for him or your
Yes.
animosity.
It was definitely hatred and animosity, and I didn't like how he was just a liar,
Mhm,
crying racism or implying racism. He rarely used the word racism. The sophisticated blacks don't use that word, but they're still implying it. And I was starting to get into politics because I was listening to the Jesse Lee Peterson show at that point, who I got into, listening to and coming to his church because I was Christian and I wanted to be a real Christian, and I didn't
mm,
feel churches and those my own direction was quite right. I liked some of the
mhm,
churches that I would go to, but it wasn't hard hitting anymore the way that
mm,
his message is, just plain black and white, right and wrong. You are wrong, but you can repent and you can be free. So I started working for Jesse after several years going to his church, and then he got me started on the Hake Report, my podcast, and I've been presenting news segments on his show and reading the super chats of the supporters and taking notes on his church services and his daily podcast show.
yeah, and it's a call-in show you have over there, but I find
Yes,
very interesting. I like to get the input and the views of your callers. And
so do
you
I.
have a really wide range of callers: black, white, Hispanic, old,
That's
young
right.
too, boomers, millennials.
Yeah. And for a
Mhm,
while, we were hearing from people all over the world because we had Skype. People could call, we didn't have Skype, but people could call in using Skype to our 800 number. And now Skype has been killed by Microsoft, who bought it and
mm,
destroyed it. And now it's a little trickier for people to find a way to call into our show, but who are international. Because we used to hear
mm,
from people from Bulgaria, from all over the world, Asia, Russia, Africa,
mm.
and elsewhere. Still, people do call in from India and elsewhere, but it's a little bit fewer because of that problem.
So, hey, there's a lot of mess happening in the US right now, and I'd like to get your insight on it. Now, recently we had the shooting of a 37-year-old Rennie Good, who was shot and killed by ICE, and for the UK audience, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and that was in Minneapolis, and that
That's right.
sparked large protests across the US. And I believe it was protests yesterday, and someone else gets shot. Now, the media coverage over here, it's basically conveying how ICE is to blame for essentially everything there. um, the tragic death of Renee, and it is tragic for her family. They've lost a member of her family, their daughter, and but now I would like. Could you play video one, please? I would just like to play this short clip of the incident and then get your views on it afterwards. Yep.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you. Show your face. I'm not mad at you. That's okay. We don't change our plates every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen, former fucking president. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the
All right,
car.
baby, come on.
Oh!
So that video's not so good. I saw a longer version. It was like 3.5 minutes, and that was a better take on what happened. Um, so where's your view on that incident and the protests that have followed?
I would say that those two women were clearly in the wrong in their attitude and their behavior towards those ICE officers, meddling where they didn't belong. And there was a bit of confusion, and where women are, there's oftentimes confusion because they go out and do things that they don't need to be doing. The women weren't even in sync with each other, really, because you saw in that video where the woman who was outside with her camera, she went to try to get into the passenger side door just as the other woman was backing up and starting to drive off. And then she starts telling, drive, 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 not really aware of their surroundings. I don't know whether that woman was purposefully trying to hit the officer, but I do believe that she did hit the officer. In fact, I don't believe that she purposely tried to hit him. I think that she just was kind of unaware and kind of didn't care. She did know, I have to believe that she did know that the other ICE officer was at her door trying to get her to come out. And she was non-compliant with that. So she was clearly in the wrong. You can debate and question whether the ICE officers were wrong. I'm leaning towards they were justified. You can make the claim, as the liberal media is doing internationally and in our country, that the ICE officers shouldn't be there in the first place, terrorizing and arresting illegals and interacting with these people. It's causing trouble because these people don't want it. But the troublemakers are really the ones who are protesting. The troublemakers are really the ones who are running from the police when they're here illegally and they're trying to get away from being captured and possibly deported. Those are the criminals. And so I think that Trump is doing a really good thing. And I hope that he continues to double down, make sure that his guys are disciplined and do things in the right way. They're going to have a lot of propaganda stories like this where people get shot because they're not doing things in the right way. They're not, and they want that. They want that so that they can riot. These are communist riots, just like we saw with George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter riots. Same type of people. And they don't really have any love for America. And if we let them win, then it's over much faster for America. And I know that America's gone. I know that, we have diverse countries that are no longer civilized. But if we can have an example, a little hint of light in a man like Trump and men like these who are enforcing the law, then they can maybe have a taste of that law and order. And a little light can go a long way toward preserving a little bit of civilization, which is good for everybody.
My view on it is essentially when law enforcement officers are pulling you over and asking you to comply with their orders, and they've got guns drawn too, it's not a good idea to turn your car reverse and drive away.
Right.
That's a recipe for suicide, and it's quite interesting that the other night I was watching the film The Naked Gun. Have you ever seen the film The Naked Gun, the original one with Leslie Nielsen?
I never saw it. I've seen maybe bits of it, but I was a kid and I was sheltered. I thought of it as a funny movie because I'd seen bits of it from childhood, but I've never really seen it.
Well, there's a scene where Leslie Nielsen drives to the police station, and he parks his car and he gets out, and all of a sudden this car drives past him and almost runs him over, and he pulls out his badge and his gun and he shouts, "Police squad, stop the car!" And then he immediately starts firing, and then the car crashes into another building and blows up because the bullets hit the gas tank. Well, the joke in it is it's his car. He just didn't hit the brake, so the car's driving right past him because he couldn't park it properly. But this is nothing new. When in the United States, when law enforcement is pulling you over, if you're not complying, especially when they have their weapons drawn, tragedies occur. And although, again, I do think it is a tragedy because a family's lost someone who they love, she didn't do the right thing. She didn't do the sensible thing, the rational thing, and it led to what has happened. And again, there is a context to this, isn't there? Like, that's the 45-second clip, but there was a lot that occurred before it. So the way I see it, it's a tragedy, but she should have acted differently in the situation. And from what I understand, hasn't Trump deported, or ICE deported something along the lines of 300,000 to 500,000, and they've recently received a $75 billion boost by Congress. So this is just the beginning, isn't it?
Hopefully so. People have been dissatisfied with our deportation numbers, but what I understand is our net migration is possibly even negative. I saw on a Drudge Report headline, I still check out Drudge sometimes, that the amount of people coming in is relatively low. And although our deportation numbers aren't as high as some people would want them to be, including probably Trump and me, they are significant, and and we have a net negative, meaning people are leaving the country more than they're coming in. And that may be a little bit of a hit on the economy, which is not necessarily good for short term. I think it's going to be a really good thing. And I am really happy that we don't have a weak person in office who's going to cave to political pressure the way that what we're used to seeing, you know?
Have you got any interesting chats? Because I see you busy.
Someone was saying, do you think the Earth is a ball in space?
Right, maybe I'll ask you. Maybe I'll ask Hake that later. But you know what I find inconsistent, Hake, right? Is while Trump is basically calling on the protesters in Minneapolis to stop, he's essentially at the same time telling the Iranian people to overthrow their institutions and that help is on the way. Why
Yeah.
the hell do you think Trump is getting so focused and involved in Iran?
You know what? I don't exactly know. I don't know much about Iran. I don't know much about history. I don't know much about the geopolitics and things like that. I didn't
Mhm.
even know much about Venezuela. I know that Iran had a nuclear deal with Obama, and anything Obama did, I didn't like. When I remember seeing Obama, and I think maybe last time we talked about Bibi Netanyahu.
Mhm.
Netanyahu was prime minister even during Obama's years.
Yeah, we had
And
a little bit of a disagreement in terms of where I stand on that, and I think you are a bit more sympathetic towards Netanyahu than I am.
yeah, I think of Netanyahu as more genuine, more manly, and he likes Trump better than the Democrats like Trump, you know? He's more of a friend of America than the Democrats, I think. Now you could say, "Oh, you know, he's a total snake. He's only pretending to be friends because Trump is getting along with him." And you may have a point. You may prove me wrong long term. But I just remember not liking Obama working with Iran and giving them all that money. They gave him like pallets of cash that was supposedly theirs, but we had frozen it because they were funding, I don't know. The claim is, and it's generally accepted, and I don't know, that they fund terrorist groups. Now, one man's terrorism is another man's freedom fighter or whatever. I get that. But they fund Hamas, I heard, and Houthi rebels, and I don't know if they're involved with ISIS at all. I don't think so, but I don't know.
I would like to address that one point.
Okay.
A lot of people are calling for Iran to be attacked because they support terrorism.
Yeah.
Do you know who the current president of Syria is?
No, I don't.
He's a man called Al-Jilani, who was the former head of ISIS and
Oh, really?
Al-Qaeda. You know Al-Qaeda, the group that attacked the US and killed thousands of US citizens. Well, the former head of Al-Qaeda is now the president of Syria. And this, over the last 2 weeks, his military, the Syrian military, have been killing protesters in the city of Aleppo, primarily Kurds, killing hundreds. And he got an invitation to the White House and Downing Street and was called a handsome man.
Oh, I
Handsome
remember
man.
that moment. I forgot that's the new guy, huh?
Yeah,
Interesting.
and so the group that kills thousands of Americans, you know, they don't get attacked. He doesn't get attacked, you know, but the Iranians, I mean, the main reason I think it's a bad idea to attack Iran kind of goes back to history. I mean, recent history, you can think back to the 1950s when the British controlled the Iranian oil. And then Iran's leader, they had a new leader called Mossadegh in the early 1950s, and he nationalized the oil and it took it out of the hands of the British and instead it put it in the hands of the Iranians. And then the CIA and British intelligence got involved in an operation called Operation Ajax, and they overthrew the Iranian leader Mossadegh and installed the Shah. But the Shah eventually allowed the British back in and the Americans to extract the oil. But he was so oppressive to Iranian people that the Ayatollah came in to power, and you had the Iranian Revolution. So the British and the Americans have been meddling in Iran for so long, and it never works out, right? It never goes well. So I'm kind of like, what the hell's Trump doing? Why is he? And we had that attack in Fordo, the nuclear site, a few months ago during the, that basically sealed the deal in the 12-day war. So, do you think Trump's going to order an attack on Iran? And do you think that would be a good thing?
Say that. What was the second part of the question?
Do you think Trump will order an attack on Iran, and do you think that will end in a good way?
So far, most of the things that he's done internationally has worked out just fine, I think. He bombed Syria and people were mad about that, but nothing came of it back in 2017 or whatever.
Yeah.
He went after Venezuela. We don't know what's going to happen out of that. He got the Venezuela guy. He's done different things with North Korea, with Putin, and during his times, nothing went out of control. Nothing spiraled out of control. Only after he was left office did they go out of control. I guess maybe they waited around until they got a weak president like Biden so they could do what they wanted. That's my wondering. I kind of sense that. I feel that may be the case. So I don't know. I think that he will do. I think that whatever he does, he will try to keep overall peace and make stuff better, and hopefully not worse. But long term.
Sorry for interrupting, Hake. If any of the viewers have got anything interesting for me that you want me to ask Hake, leave it in the chats, because they're telling me strange stuff like is the earth flat or round, and the kind of stuff you get on your show.
Right.
Israel did 9/11, blamed Muslims, and then imported into Scotland.
Right. Right. Could you play clip 2, please? Here's a clip of someone I'm sure you're familiar with. She's a very popular social media figure, and we go.
Where should we begin? War everywhere. That's just what we're doing. It definitely seems like land grab everywhere. And it doesn't seem like it. That's what's happening. So many people, oh my gosh, you won't believe what these radicals are doing. And of course, it just seems to be that whenever Bibi Netanyahu's around the corner, like, hey, I want that piece of land, suddenly our media starts telling us, hey, you wouldn't believe how free these people are trying to get in Iran. These people are really, we need to free the Iranians. Oh, they've been living in oppression. Bibi is over here like, ooh, land. Oh, no, really? It's about spreading democracy. Code word, that's military code word for dropping bombs and stealing a bunch of stuff that isn't ours, a bunch of land that isn't ours. Anyways, war with Iran, it's now back on the table firmly. Why? Because, well, Israel wants it. I find it so funny when people make the argument, well, you wouldn't want to live in this country in the Middle East. You wouldn't want to live in Iraq. And obviously, the West is the best. Yeah, do you want to know why I wouldn't want to live there? Why I want to live in Libya? We want to live in Iraq? Because we bombed them. We wouldn't stop bombing them. We bombed them pretty much into the actual dark ages. That's the goal of these things, is to make it so these people can't live ahead and live in poverty.
That's Candace Owens. What's your view on Candace Owens? Because she's got a background where she's a Christian, and I'm sure she seems quite sincere in terms of her Christianity. But again, you know, she's very opinionated, and you know, what's your views on Candace? What she just said?
She comes off as sort of a smart mouth, know-it-all. Um, she may be telling part of the story, that she may have some good points that, you know, are, like you pointed out, are meddling and our bombing and all that stuff. And it hasn't been like Trump was doing those things. Like, because I think of Trump as a common sense guy who will take tough measures and overwhelming force tough measures to make a point and then be done and try to be friends again. Whereas these other people are, they are trying to spread that democracy stuff. I hate that term, spread democracy. We're supposed to spread Christianity, if anything, and not through war. So I'm with her on that point, but I don't think of it as a Netanyahu thing necessarily. I know that Iran and Venezuela and Russia and China and some of these other like the terrorist groups have been like a problem for kind of the whole world. And I know that we've had problems with the immigration stuff, and part of that is because we're creating refugees. And so I don't know what's going on. I think that Trump is a more sensible man and a more trustworthy and sincere man than Candace. So I trust Trump more than Candace.
You know,
but I don't know, Trump could make mistakes and errors.
I recently had on my show a former State Department official, and he was also a Marine Corps intelligence captain, Matthew Ho. And I was trying to get his take on what was going on in Venezuela, South America. And his position is that this was basically coming from Rubio. You know, Rubio's a Cuban exile, and he's had some animus towards the Cuban government and the Venezuelan government for a long time. And so this is Rubio's injection. This is like Rubio's foreign policy. Because, you know, we've heard Trump say a lot of things in regards to foreign policy over the, you know, his first term, his interim period out of office and now. And but he's been very active when it comes to using his military recently, and that's what's peculiar to me. We've seen the bombing of Venezuela, and Maduro, the president of Venezuela, being captured. President Maduro. We saw the bombing of Syria last week. We saw the bombing of Nigeria last month. A couple of months, we saw the bombing of Yemen. And for some reason, he keeps on supplying Ukraine with intelligence and weaponry through the Pearl program. God knows why he's supplying Zelensky in Ukraine with ammunition still. I don't get it. If he just cut that when he came into office, that war would have been over now. But he keeps on supplying them. And then we have this Greenland issue. He wants to expand the American borders to encompass Greenland. And do you? I mean, to me, like when I hear this, it sounds more like the neocon strategy of the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, than the American first, program that he was promoting during the election. What do you think of that?
I don't necessarily think so, because Trump has always been more nakedly, we need to take the oil. You know, we need to get that oil. When we were when he was running for office, his first term, 2015, 2016, he said, we never should have gone to Iraq. And since we were in Iraq, though, we should have taken the oil, or whichever Middle Eastern country, Afghanistan, Iraq, I don't know. So he's more for nakedly, unashamedly taking land and taking oil and making things beneficial for us, for America, not pretending to be selfless, which is what George W. Bush did. And he had these endless wars. He was much more of a warmonger, I heard. I wasn't really paying a lot of attention. I was in college and didn't care.
Mm.
And Greenland is really for us and for maybe world stability, if you will, where Denmark is not really capable of growing and maintaining and defending it the way that we would be, and preventing Russia and China from getting it. I never thought of Russia and China expanding, but what would stop them? I don't know. So I think of Trump as being more for America's interest, and for him to go in and capture, not execute, not kill, not assassinate. Granted, he did kill maybe 100 people down there in Venezuela, but to capture Maduro, that is so crazy in like a very impressive way. It's not something that I wanted or cared about, but I didn't not want it. I don't know, I don't care, but I'm quite impressed that he would do that, and that puts all these other countries on notice that we can do kinda what we want. So, I think it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, yeah. If you were a physician, you really are cutting the body open and removing the tumor.
Yeah.
That's the way, maybe he looks at it, and I understand the Venezuelan operation. Maybe he thinks, by removing the head of state and getting the vice president to be more in fear of Trump, in fear of America, they can make her more compliant, and then they can extract the oil and get other nations to buy the oil in the dollar, because
Yeah.
Venezuela was selling their oil in different currencies. In that sense, could work. It could work, but it could also piss off a lot of other countries that could just turn around and go, well, do you know what? We're just not going to use the dollar. And so then he's going to need to go to those countries. And then that's more US military involvement until he needs to up the American military budget to something that's extortionate. Like we've seen next year, I think the US military budget for next year is going to be 1.5 trillion. But
Wow.
is the largest budget we've ever seen in peacetime. It's more like a wartime budget. And that is it's interesting why he's doing that. However, like it's interesting, if he does go for Greenland, because the Danes won't be able to stop.
I know, huh? You know,
the
there's
Americans.
he has to be very politically popular he has to do things that are politically popular, or else that are just tough and that you just have to accept. What the point in favor of him in terms of the Venezuela thing, in terms of not pissing off other countries, is that the UN, which the UN I don't like, but the UN was saying Maduro is not the rightful president. They cheated on the election or whatever. And a whole bunch of other countries were not even accepting him as a legitimate president. And then the Venezuelan people here, I haven't seen an example of Venezuelan people being mad. Maybe there are some Venezuelan people who are not happy that he was captured, but everybody I've seen on social media, and granted, social media is propaganda, but everybody I've seen has been happy. So
it's interesting because you're familiar with a lot of the big names in social media, and we could go to like Alex Jones. We could
Yeah.
talk about Alex Jones, his employee who left recently, Owen Scheuer, and they have a completely different take on the Venezuela operation. Alex
Interesting.
Jones is on board. Owen Scheuer just considers that more regime change operations, meddling in other countries, that's going to backfire. And Alex Jones recently showed a video of a large protest that was allegedly just after Maduro was toppled, with people Venezuelan celebrating. And it was pointed out that this was a video that was taken several years ago. So again, you're right. You got to take social media with a pinch of salt, because there is so much nonsense in it.
Yeah.
I hope it does work out for Trump in that sense, because you don't want to see a massive wave of Venezuelan migrants coming to the US. I mean, imagine
Right.
that. Trump's got this whole thing with closing the border and deporting ICE, deporting people using ICE, and then you've got 5 million Venezuelans coming up because of these military actions. That's not going to be good.
A lot of Venezuelans were leaving because of Maduro, and we were getting some of them when we were getting that Train de Aragua gang from them. What you said, if I can interrupt, reminds me of the protests in Iran. I am not for these protests in Iran. I don't like seeing. I get that their regime may be brutal and murderous or whatever. I don't know. Um, I have never been for those Iranian women who want to take off their hijab and cause trouble, because our liberal media is like, oh yes, free the Iranian women from wearing the hijab and let them be free. Like, no, forget that. And I never have liked seeing fires and fighting in the streets. I just don't like seeing that. I don't trust it. It feels like people have alleged that Mossad is in there stirring up trouble, and these people are tools of Israel, like you, like some people may think, and that may be. I don't like it. I don't trust it. So there's that. I do trust Trump.
But it was
like
admitted,
evil versus evil.
it wasn't admitted in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, that Mossad is in Iran, essentially stirring things up, and it happens. It happens. I mean, MI6, MI6 has been involved in that whole Iranian theater.
Really?
I mean, it was MI6 and the CIA that basically overthrew Mossadegh in the 50s through Operation Ajax. So, you know, MI6, the CIA, they've been doing it a long time. And let's just, you know, cut to the chase. Iran's biggest enemy is Israel. So, of course, Israel would like to see the Ayatollah toppled. I mean, I'm not saying that Israel is directly responsible for the protests,
Right.
but of course they would like to
Sure, no
see
trouble.
the Ayatollah toppled. Like, transition us away from international affairs and Trump. So, you describe yourself as a homegrown Christian, and that's another reason I kind of like your show, because and you know, Jesse Lee Peterson's show, because you know, you get that dialogue, especially with your callers. But I've noticed something in popular culture recently. Christianity is becoming more in vogue, it seems, recently, with celebrities like Nick Fuentes, Russell Brand, Tucker Carlson. They're all coming out and preaching the gospel and, you know, conveying a Christian message. Do you think there's been like a Christian revivalism of sorts, especially in US culture? Do you think, and do you think it's authentic?
In some cases, I do believe it is. I really admire and appreciate Nick Fuentes. I refer to him as our future president. I don't watch him a lot, but when I do see him, he's real. And he kind of exposed Tucker Carlson, whom I also really have liked over the recent years, when he had his Fox News show and he was just dominating people during the Trump years. He seems to have gotten just better and better. There's cracks in the armor there. I don't know. He seems like he can't really be up front always.
Would do cracks in Nick Fuentes' armor?
No, I'm talking about in Tucker Carlson.
Oh, right.
Yeah, in Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson had an interview with Nick Fuentes that was very interesting, because I didn't know about Nick Fuentes' backstory. I didn't know that he was a fan of Mark Levin. I didn't know that Mark Levin showed him that the whites becoming a minority was not a good thing. I didn't know that Nick Fuentes thought that Ted Cruz was the man and Rand Paul and not Trump at first, you know, because he was an 18-year-old or whatever. So it was very interesting hearing, you know, about the attempt on his life, and then Tucker trying to have a conversation with him about women, and Tucker being a little bit more of a woman pleaser and a happy wife, happy life type of person. And then Tucker kind of underhandedly accusing him of anti-Semitism and hating all Jews or whatever, blaming Jews, which is, Fuentes may have an issue with Jews. I don't know, in his inner being. I don't know. I can't really tell. But Tucker went off on some other podcast I heard and accused him of being anti-Semitic right after having a nice, beautiful conversation with him and not calling him that. So it was, he's being kind of like indirect, and that just shows that he's kind of like a weak guy. Nice, but weak. Wants what's right, but kind of weak like so many people. So
Yeah.
I don't know as much about Russell Brand, but it's cool. I like that there's a lot of Catholics, there's a lot of Orthodox, and there are normal young Christians who want to do right. A lot of them stay on that judgment and pride, and they just trade one identity for another, and it doesn't seem real in terms of the masses, but there are a few who will be real about it, and that's a good thing.
Have we got any interest in the chats?
When Pinocchio says Brian Kilmeade better than Mark Levine.
Brian Kilmeade. I can't stand Brian Kilmeade.
Oh, really?
Do you like Brian Kilmeade, Hake?
I like him all right. I mean, I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him much, but I see him as kind of like a not quite a Tucker Carlson level, but kind of like that in that he has to play the game to stay on Fox News. Maybe I don't know what motivates him, but
he's a sports figure, isn't he? Does he not have a background in sports?
Brian Kilmeade, maybe, but I think of him more as being the Kilmeade was more of a Fox News host or co-host, and he's been on the Jason Lee Peterson show. I've remember him from some books that he's written, and been on the JLP show. But he's sort of a little bit too politically correct for my taste. I haven't kept up with him closely. I can understand you not liking him.
Well, I tell you why I think he's very insincere. See, on the day of the January 6th riot, and I was listening to Fox News, and I recall listening to the Brian Kilmeade show, and he had on a number of guests, and one of the guests was really anti-Trump, but how we got to sort this out. And I remember Brian Kilmeade saying we got to take back the Republican Party. Now, who was this? What was he talking about there? He was talking about taking back the Republican Party from MAGA, taking back the Republican Party from Trump. And this was on January 6th when you had that riot
Wow.
in 2020. So when you hear Brian Kilmeade interview Trump and Brian Kilmeade talk about how he likes Trump, I don't think he does. I think he's just on that train because he needs to be on that train. That Trump train. Yeah, I don't think he's sincere at all.
Yeah, whatever. It could be. I don't know. I don't know what motivates him. I don't really watch him closely. I just there are so few people who present masculinity and manliness on any level in the popular world, that it's hard to find like a normal guy. And he presents himself a little bit as more of a normal guy than most. But you're totally right. He could be either two-faced or easily moved and swayed by what seems to be the political winds or whatever. He might have seen that the J6 was not good politically for Trump and Trump supporters in the at least in the short term.
Yeah.
But that could be the sign of a bit of a backstabber or somebody who's not trustworthy.
Any other interesting chats?
Again, just Pinocchio saying that he likes him, but he's a bit of a dork.
He's a bit of a dork. Nothing about flat earth this time, no.
CIA media guy is phony. Oh, hot take.
Right. Hey, another thing, how you describe your show as Christianity from a alpha male perspective. Right?
Yeah.
So, would you also describe yourself as a reborn Christian? And if so, what does that mean to you? What is a reborn Christian?
I don't know if I would.
Here's another question. Can you be a Christian but not be reborn? Not be a reborn Christian?
I've become more loose with my term Christian. If somebody claims to be a Christian, I'll accept it, even if they're even if there's very little that's Christian about them. For example, and what changed my mind about that actually was a guy who's dead now, a comedian, Norm Macdonald. He didn't appreciate this guy's joke about, I don't like the Bible. This guy was trying to be a comedian, right? I don't like the Bible. I much prefer Harry Potter. And Norm Macdonald said, I don't find that a very funny joke because the author of Harry Potter is a Christian, considers herself a Christian. She's a liberal, she's a feminist, but she considers herself a Christian. I'm saying she's a liberal and feminist. And she actually wrote Harry Potter, you know, it was inspired by some of the biblical themes. And so he made that point. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point. Not to be quite so judgmental of the people who claim to be Christians, right? Because I'm like, oh, you can't be a Christian and be for the gay agenda. Because a lot of people claim to be Christians and they're for the gays, they're for the illegals and all these things. Now I'm like, okay, yeah, fine, you guys are Christians. And they are examples, and many of us conservative Christians are examples of people who aren't born again, reborn Christians. So I don't necessarily think of myself as reborn.
Right.
I don't know at this point. I think that as Jesus said in the Bible to Nicodemus, you have to be a new creation. You are a new creation. You have to be born again of the Spirit. And a lot of us, I see as no different really from the world, except that we were trained right, quote unquote. We were trained to have the right moral values, to vote in the correct way, not to support this and not to support that. But we're still hateful. We're still out of control. We're still prideful and prone to bickering and arguments. And the whole New Testament is talking about don't be backbiting, don't be gossiping, don't be bickering and fighting and quarreling amongst yourselves. Don't be out of control. You're supposed to be new. Faith without works is dead. So I think that a reborn Christian is one who's a man of peace, who's living it. And there may be people who were reborn and may not even have really had the Christianese language for it because they weren't raised on the Bible, or they didn't swallow up that Christianese Bible talk that you're used to hearing from a lot of people.
And that's interesting because the last time we spoke, I was telling you at that time I was reading the Ashtavakra Gita and Paramahansa Yogananda's Yoga of Jesus, and they describe a lot of the same things that is in the Bible. However, we're using different terminology, we're using a different description, but they're essentially talking about the same thing. But you know, I asked that question about you being a reborn Christian for a reason, and it's because I have maybe a unique take on Christianity, probably because I've been influenced over the years by reading the Gnostic Gospels. And take the Trinity as an example, right? I would like to use this as an example. So we've got God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And I know I've listened to Jesse Lee Peterson and the past when people bring up the Trinity, and he's like triune, you know, he starts challenging them on the Trinity. Right?
Yeah.
So I like that. But here's what my take on this is. So, you know, you get God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And it's referencing, I think, El, which is the Father, you know, because El was the original name for God. You know, it's in the name Israel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, and
Wow.
El, incidentally, is also in Canaan associated with the planet Saturn, which was worshipped on Saturday, and which was the original day of the Shabbat. So, you know, El, the Father, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Mind or breath, which is the pneuma. In Greek, and as you know, the Greek is the core of the original Christian message because Christianity was originally written. The Bible was originally written, sorry, in Greek. So the Greek is, again, core to understanding the original message of the Bible, from what I understand. And sorry, can you hear me? Hey,
Yes, I can.
sorry, the computer screen just flashed. And this, I think, is supported by some of the Gnostic Gospels I've read, like the Gospel of Philip. Is this lacuna in the Gospel of Philip? And it says the dead will inherit nothing, right? The dead inherit nothing, yet if they inherit what is living, they gain eternal life. Then in another lacuna in the Ode to Solomon, it says something to the effect, but the dead ran towards me and I wrote my name on their head and now they are free. And that is why, in my mind, Jesus is called the living God, because in each generation we get new converts to Christianity, and they have that Holy Spirit that is the Holy Mind. So the Spirit and the Trinity is referencing the mind, and that's why we refer to Jesus as the living God, because with each generation, the psyche, the consciousness of Christ continues. It never dies. If am I kind of making sense in my understanding of the Trinity? Uh, does that kind of ring true to you in any way?
I don't know. Are you saying that? And I don't necessarily know what you mean. Are you saying that Jesus is living through the consciousness and minds of the Christians?
That is the original core message in Greek of the Trinity. The Holy Spirit is the pneuma, which means the animating breath or mind. So we're talking about the Father, which is El, the Son, which is Jesus, and the pneuma, which is the mind, the holy mind. And that is relevant, especially when you compare it to the Gnostic Gospels, which is essentially saying the same thing, where in one lacuna that I described to you, it says the dead inherit nothing, right? So if you're a pagan, if you die as James Hake and you're a pagan, you inherit nothing. But if you die as a Christian, you inherit eternal life, because Christians never die. Well, if you have the mind of Christ, that never dies, because with each generation we get new Christians. You're not close to Christ, you are Christ. And that's what makes Christ the living God. And so that's also why we use, I understand, as we use terms like reborn. So why would we use the term we're reborn? We're basically conveying that we're no longer who we are. We're something else. We're a Christ now. And that Christ is the living God. We don't call it the dead God. We call it the living God, because it never dies, because with each subsequent generations, we remain Christ. It's like a consciousness, a mind that never dissolves, it never dies. But to be a Christ, we need to have his name written on our head and be free, as referred, as is in the Ode to Solomon, where the lacuna says, the dead ran towards me and I wrote my name on their heads, and now they are free and now they are mine. And I guess I don't know. I mean, that's just my understanding of it. So it could be completely wrong, but that's where I am with it. And I was just wanting to run it past you. What do you? Is it making sense?
It sounds good, and it may be right. It's something I'll have to ponder.
Mhm.
It's a mystery what happens with our spirits, and what God is, and what he does, and how he works, and how we change, and if we change. Because there's a lot of people who just kind of convince themselves that they've changed, or resign themselves that they won't change or can't change. And that's interesting.
Mhm.
In a sense, in the Bible, at some point, Jesus says, "Is it not written that I have said ye are gods?" Where God is telling the judges that they are gods. They were men, but now they're gods, judging. And
Again, and it's, I mean, I also had this discussion recently with someone who didn't know that the reason Jesus was crucified is because he claimed he was the king. And when we read the book of Matthew, and I think it's the first page in the book of Matthew, you've got the lineage of Jesus, how he's descended from King David. So he was killed for maintaining he was the king. And he wasn't killed for working miracles, or it was on the cross, the king of the Jews, and it was mocking him for arguing he was the king. But it's interesting to me as well, because when I don't have a Christian social circle, so this is just me thinking a lot and reading. And when I read the Bible and I read stories about how Jesus meets the Samaritan, the woman at the well, and she's taken aback by why Jesus is speaking to her, because the Samaritans were basically the product of interracial marriage or interracial sex. The Jews were quite, as racist, in the sense that if you if you married or got involved with someone of a different race, you were an outcast, and the Samaritans were outcasts. So she was taken aback by Jesus, speaking to her. And so I draw that distinction quite sharply between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that, we're not Jews. We don't worship El, like as I was referencing earlier, Israel, and you've got the archangels that all have El in it, and then you've got the Elohim, and the connection between this language in ancient Canaan, which they use that term to associate with Saturn worship. And I think it's shrouded in imagination, and almost like a veil of imagination. And we're still trying to make sense of this scripture. And it's like we're in a trap in our own minds. And that's another reason why I find the Jesse Lee Peterson show and your show so refreshing, because you're conveying the message that you need to escape that trap in your mind, that it's all thoughts, and these thoughts are just going to bog you down, and they're not real. The thoughts themselves are not real. They're just like, emanations of your psyche.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jesse pointed out was that Jesus said that we're supposed to worship in spirit and truth, but people worship in their imaginations. They read that, and they claim to believe it because it's written there and they were brought up that way. And then when push comes to shove and you're presented with a challenge to your mind, a challenge to the task at hand, a challenge to your ego, you puff up and lash out, and you show that you have no faith. You show that you have no confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You show that you're not a man. You're not unshakable, or a woman in the case of a woman. You're able to be pushed around by the world. You're able to be provoked by the world, and it's interesting.
So your message is not to identify and too much with the thoughts and allow yourself to be controlled by them, nor let others use your thoughts to control you, because again, your thoughts are not you.
Yeah. We criticize blacks a lot for identifying with their blackness. And then they will call in and try to tempt us to identify with our whiteness, or try to tempt us to, in some way, to identify with the ego. When you get into a battle with somebody on the road, and some car offends you by the way that they drive, or somebody offends you, you try to offend them back because your ego was pricked, and you try to prick their ego, and you're just trying to expose each other as being weak human beings, which everybody tends to be. And so
Sorry, Haig. I think it was a question. Was there a question in the
No,
chat?
no, they were just having trouble understanding your accent because it's Scottish.
Right.
You know, you need to understand that people in America don't really have accents, so to speak. So for them, you know, obviously it takes a bit of actual listening,
Mhm.
and it's a very, you know, thin thing in America right now.
Right.
You know, a lot of people talking but not listening.
So have you ever found yourself in that spot where you've had a caller, and again, like you were referencing, they are identifying with a race and maybe trying to challenge you in a way, maybe accusing you of acting in a certain way that white people do, and that you're being prejudiced. Do you ever? When's the last time you received a caller that brung that emotion out in you, and you just wanted to lash out on the?
Well, this morning, I got a call from a regular caller, a black. He considers himself a Hebrew Israelite. He thinks he's one of the real Jews, but he's black and American. And he said that no snitch culture came from white people. You know how blacks don't want to admit to police or tell police about the criminal in their community who committed a crime, even a murder. They won't talk to police. No snitch. Don't snitch. Don't tell on your fellow black. And he said that came from Italian, Sicilian mafia culture in the 80s after the movie Scarface. They didn't appreciate snitches. They would get their heads cut off or whatever. And he said that originated from whites. That's where they got it from. And he was basically trying to accuse and blame whites for what blacks are doing. And that's what a lot of times they do, is they accuse whites of starting the gay thing, which I don't know if that's true either. I think it's just an evil human nature thing. So
But I do know an officer and who is serving or served not that long ago in Iraq, and he was telling me how homosexuality is rife in Iraq. Like they were doing it in the alleyways, they were doing it out in the streets. He
Wow.
told me how he pulled over a vehicle that was parked, and he noticed that there were several people in the vehicle, and it was just a group of men having sex inside the car outside.
Oh, that's it.
So you know, it is something that is prevalent across the world, and it's not a white thing. You know, it didn't
Right.
originate in Europe, although the Greeks did have a big thing with that. You know, you can see it in their art and their architecture.
Yeah.
You used to have these callers, and I noticed that it was two callers in particular, and there was a good back and forth between them, and it was very spirited, and it sometimes brought it out in yourself. I think it was Joe, and you used to have a caricature snake puppet for him, and there was
Yeah.
another one, Mark. What happened
That's
to
right.
Joe and Mark? I never hear of Joe and Mark anymore.
I banned Joe
Mm.
because I had allowed him basically to use me in that he would call and I would talk with him and entertain and debate with him for hours, really, across a course of a couple of weeks or a month. We would have probably hours worth of conversations debating, and because he's an intellectual and he pulls me into that intellectualism. I think of him as very dishonest, and there are other black intellectual callers who remind me of him. But it's so he thought Obama was a great president, and he thinks that I only didn't like Obama because Obama was black. But I'm like, no, Obama was basically a communist. If he had been a Clarence Thomas type of black, I would have liked him. Clarence Thomas being, a normal conservative guy. And so, but Joe was such a snake, and he justified, you mentioned Alex Jones. Alex Jones owes supposedly $1 billion to the Sandy Hook families, of the Newtown shooting, because he speculated that those may have been paid actors, and I don't even know that he really made that definitive claim, because he'll make a claim and then go back on it and claim again and then be like, go back on it, all in the same show. And from what I understand, I've never really watched a whole show of his, although I do appreciate it and admire him. But he's sort of a little bit reckless, whereas I'll be like, I don't know. And it's
Mhm.
smarter to say, I don't know what happened, because you can get sued, especially if you're a conservative in a liberal world, such as the court system, a communist world like the court system, and the victims of a liberal mass shooting in a liberal town. The liberal family is going to blame the conservatives for
Yeah.
something that happened among the liberal world, you know? And so
Yeah,
that's what happened. And
I
he
think the
justified
problem.
that. What's that?
Sorry, I was going to say, I think the problem with Alex Jones is he doesn't know when to close his mouth. He just
Yeah.
goes off in a run-off sentence, and there's so much hyperbole in what he says, and
Yeah.
he gets into trouble for it. But he's done so much in terms of revealing a lot of you know, things that these NGOs are doing. The most recent one that I tuned in for was that he was great in terms of exposing it, was how the Wuhan lab thing, and how the virus was connected to it. And he was saying that before that was mainstream. And then, you know, a lot of these big names in the medical industry were coming on the show exposing how you know, Fauci and all these characters were connected. So he has done a lot of great work in the past. So, you know, I appreciate him for that. But
Me too. But you're right. I think it's his anger and passion are a double-edged sword. It makes for a very entertaining show, but it's also dangerous for himself, because although I don't believe he's at all at fault for those people allegedly getting harassed, and I don't think that he's owes anybody $1 billion or even really $1 million. I don't think that it was a justified lawsuit. I think it was a frivolous lawsuit. It was evil.
yeah.
Um,
And but
justifying that.
my point was, like, in terms of your show, when you had guests like Joe and Mark on, one seemed to provoke the other. Especially when Joe came on first, Mark had to get on. And I noticed that, and there was so much vitriol and
Yeah.
anger, very often anger in his voice for what you know, Joe was saying. And it was amusing to listen to, and you know, it's a shame you don't have him on anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, Hake, as I said, it's over here, it's like almost half two. So I'm going to wrap this thing up. But before we do, is there anything you would like to promote or just tell the audience about?
I would like the people to check out Punchy TV and American Anchor Baby. A lot of people are still really not aware of Punchy TV, which is a show that I co-host with Anchor Baby. You're probably familiar with Anchor Baby. He's the
Yeah,
one who
but I struggle to get him on online. As for example, if I'm using my Alexa, you know, I can say, Alexa, Hake report, but I can never get an Anchor Baby. Is that what the name of the show is? The Anchor Baby?
It's called American Anchor Baby.
Right.
American Anchor Baby. So I can send you the links to his stuff, and
Right.
and Punchy TV, Punchie TV. They're interested in programs, and I have learned a bit from both of those. You know, in addition to JLP's stuff, I really to this day I am a big fan of Church with Jesse Lee Peterson on the Bond YouTube channel, and it's also on Jesse Lee Peterson's YouTube. I mean, Rumble. So those two things, and I'm really happy to be back on your program. I really appreciate your personality and your takes.
Yeah,
So
I will say that in terms of Jesse's show, the Church with Jesse Lee Peterson, he does have interesting people in his congregation. You know, there's an English woman, you know, and I listen to this on the Alexa in the background a lot, and so I hear the English woman, and you do have quite a group there, you know, from across the world, people who come to the United States and attend his church, and it is interesting to listen to. And he's always got a different theme each show, and it makes for good listening, and it's quite informative. So yeah, I would recommend people check that out. So
right
Hake, it's been good having you on, and you know, good evening time for where you are now.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Vincent.
Right, okay.
And shout out to your assistant there. I'm enjoying hearing his
You can
reading
hear
of
him. You can hear
the
him.
comments.
Can you
Yeah,
hear him in the
actually, I
background?
hear him a little bit. Somebody said, "Oh, he's flat Earth, and they can't understand your accent and stuff like that."
Yeah, yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I recently saw a debate on modern day debates. You've been on it yourself, and it was a flat Earth debate. You know,
Yeah,
yeah, they're always good to listen
yeah,
to the flat earthers. They make a spirited argument, don't
they do.
they? Right, Hake, it's been good seeing you again, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
And that was Hake from the Hake Report. And don't forget to check his show out. And if you enjoyed, don't forget you can donate by clicking the donation link, or go to Caledonian Elixir /buy me a coffee. The next episode we've got, I think it's next Wednesday, and we've got a couple of political analysts on debating the conflict in Venezuela and Iran. So that will be a good one, and it's in a completely different direction. So check that out. And until then, I will catch you later, people.
Gold pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarts. Get a Ractagino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Gold pressed platinum, you know it's a gas. Mom vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass. Silver, nickel or brass. Living in a high society, living on station. Part of the alliance, the United Federation. Picking up the pieces from the Cardi occupation. You could be a Klingon with a genetic mutation, a symbiote.